And I just want to provide a little bit of history. When we first started talking about this in March, we were talking about a $300 million bond. And then it went to 392, and then 500, then 750, then we pulled on 750. The memo that we had from the staff was 950, and now we're talking about $1.1 billion bond, a dual bond, or I was calling it the Omni bond. Now it's a dual Omni bond. It brings a lot of concerns to me because the last time I talked about this, I wanted to be on the same page as everybody. I was talking about making the bond idea a smaller one. It's not like I don't understand that we need infrastructure to be repaired. It's not like I don't understand that we don't need housing. It's not like I don't understand that we need a new police academy and fire department. It's just, this is a very large bond, and I was asking for something smaller, more specific, and more accountable, and that I could support. I think the mayor took an interesting approach and split up the bond into two, technically making some of it smaller and some of it bigger, but there's still no accountability because we're talking about a list of potential projects, and what the word potential means to me is that we could spend money on that, but we may not. Who knows? You know, back when we passed Measure B, we promised that we were going to improve police response times. We talked about improving 911 emergency medical fire response times, and we talked about repairing potholes. Now, the Measure B that we passed in the quarter-cent sales tax that we passed last June was supposed to bring in $40 million. This year, we're spending, can you refresh my memory, Jim? How much are we spending on streets for this fiscal cycle from our general fund?
The funding in this budget, the current year, is $1.5 million from the general fund.
Yeah, so and at the time we were talking about a revenue stream of $17 million from that specific tax. So you'll excuse me when I don't feel comfortable if things aren't spelled out more specifically in a ballot language. I call it mission creep, but I'm also, I don't know, I've got some concerns about putting forward $50 million for purchasing open space, specifically the Coyote Valley. To my recollection, I've never seen a memo from any council member. I've never seen a study session. We've never had a community discussion as to whether this was a priority or whether this was going to be funded, and now it makes it on the ballot. And according to your own statistics, actually could hurt because it was polling the least with the least support. It could actually hurt this ballot from passing. So I do have a concern with money that's going to be spent on something that the council hasn't had the time to vet, to discuss, to study. We don't know, quite frankly, anything about what would happen, and you know, and it's in the ballot measure. So, and further, this $450 million now, this is that we were talking about using for housing. I want to remind everybody who thinks that we are not doing anything to house people. We have over 1,000 units that have been approved, and many have been, a couple hundred have been constructed so far in the housing department for homeless folks. The county has just passed Measure A in 2016, which is a $1 billion bond. The city passed inclusionary housing and a 15% for all new construction, whether it's rental or for sale. Now that anybody building any unit, any housing has to pay for that. The state also has a housing tax that's on the ballot as well. And quite frankly, this will be the fourth tax. So I'm really concerned that, this is going to be an added expense. All this $1.1 billion, now your financial analysis was on 950, not 1.1 billion. So the assessment of $500,000 assessed value, the 16 point whatever cents is going to be higher than that, correct?
That's correct. We're working on those revised numbers now.
Right. So we don't know what we don't know what it's going to cost our taxpayers right now. So we don't know exactly how much what we're going to be voting on. All I could tell you is that the reason why it costs so much, one of the reasons why it costs so much to live in this area is because we have a lot of taxes. And at last meeting, I presented my own tax statement, which had 17 extra tax measures on it. That's above and beyond what the city charges for garbage and whatever the county collects for property taxes and the sewers and all that. There was 17 extra. This would be 18 and 19 on the tax measure. So I'm not. I certainly can't support the current motion as it is. It's too broad. It's too unaccountable. As it's written today, we can spend $1 on road maintenance and still be in compliance, even though it says 300 because it says potential project. And we're counting on an ordinance to come back, which an ordinance can be changed on any given Tuesday. So at this time, I'm not going to be supporting the current memo. I threw out my own memo, which is accountable. It has $300 million for pavement. It has $100 million for police and for public safety, and it has $100 million for parks. It's simple, accountable, and I think it might have a better chance of passing than a $1.1 billion bond. And I'll make a motion to move my memo forward because I want something that I think that is accountable and easy to understand.
All right, that's a superseding motion?
Yes.
Is there a second? All right, the motion fails.
Well, I can't support the current ballot. I wouldn't mind taking a look to see if you can bifurcate it, and I won't support it unless the $300 million is actually spelled out in the ballot. What is that called? The measure itself.
Okay. I just want to make sure I correct this for the record because I've heard this several times now, and it is as if somehow or another in June of 2016 we went to the voters and said if you increase sales taxes, every dollar will be spent on streets and roads. And then somehow as if not a single dollar went to streets and roads after that. So first of all, here are the facts. Of that sales tax measure, based on the numbers we have that were provided to me from budget, $19.7 million was spent on streets and roads in the 3 years that we've had that 2016 sales tax measure. That's $19.7 million out of $112.5 million that were spent in that sales tax measure. Now, here's what the sales tax measure actually promised. To fund essential city services such as improving police response to reduce violent crimes and burglaries, improving 911 emergency medical fire response times, repairing potholes in streets, expanding gang prevention, and maintaining the city's long-term financial stability, shall the city of San Jose enact a sales tax. There's a lot in there. And the question is, did we exceed that authority? And after all, it was a general tax. Unlike this one, which is a 2/3 measure, it was a general sales tax. In other words, we had the authority to spend it in any way that is lawful under the general fund. In fact, a substantial portion of that funding did fund streets and roads. And by the way, if you look at the funding that was allocated in that year, and you'll see any increases in general fund expenditures since then, overwhelmingly, it went to public safety. fire, and police. In the first year, particularly to fire, and subsequent years to police. And so there has been no breach of trust with the voters in the June 2016 measure. And any suggestion that there was any breach of trust, to me, completely undermines the facts that as we know them. And the next time we come up for a budget, that is every June when we decide what the budget is, if you feel that somehow or another we have undermined the trust of the voters in choosing police and fire, for example, as a predominant expenditure with that marginal additional general fund dollars, then there should be a proposal that says, let's cut police and fire so we can fund streets. But I haven't seen those proposals, in part because I think we all recognize the incredible imperative of public safety in this city, something that's been underfunded for too many years. So I want to make absolutely clear, I reject wholeheartedly this assumption, completely without fact, that somehow or another anyone was misled about how they voted in 2016 on that June ballot measure and how the money's been allocated. It's been allocated in a public way every time through a public budget process with a lot of community input. Councilmember, yep.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to go back to Rick real quick. On Councilmember Rocha's memo, the part about women and children, and I understand the fair housing laws and you can't discriminate on sex, but if there's a kind of an important government purpose, isn't there a workaround where we could justify it not on sexual basis, gender basis, but just on achieving a separate government objective?
Well, but it's a facial challenge. You're setting yourself up for gender and something based on a classification based on marital status as well, single women. So it doesn't include single men. It doesn't include single women without children. So I think the domestic violence it may encompass many of what you're trying to capture, but I'm concerned about a facial challenge.
Sure, okay, that's fine. I won't push that, but I do think there's something to be said for helping kids younger kind of break that cycle. So anything we could do to do that, I would be supportive. But I understand that. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Khamis.
I didn't know that I had my button pressed, but I did want to say that, Mayor, during the discussions that we had during the Measure B process, I had several people come to me from your staff and from the city manager's staff that were telling me that we were going to get $17 million in general funds. I am not saying that we didn't spend the money on some of the other items. I did say that I did speak about what was in the ballot measure, but I also want to say that they were talking to me every single time about $17 million.
And that's exactly, $17.7 million is exactly what we spent in
2 years.
Following, that year. That's all we can allocate money to in any given year in any budget. We spent exactly $17.7 million in that year, exactly as we promised the voters, exactly as the council voted.
And I understand
and there was no
that.
variation.
I understand, and I had expected it to go on for the entire 15-year lifetime of the tax, and that was my expectation. And I think that even the people overseeing, some of the people overseeing the Measure B Oversight Committee had the same thought processes, and that's what I want to say.
Lee?
I was just going to say that the MBA you referred to did identify the $17.7 million as one time in that first year. It was not identified as an ongoing expense like the other categories in that list. So that was a clarification.
Councilmember Khamis, did you want to respond to, I think there was an invitation from Councilmember Perales both as to the bifurcation and the $300 million.
Look, my responsibility is to see that this money goes to what we say it's going to go. And unless I see the language that's absolutely spelled out in the resolution and quantified, then I don't think we can be accountable. Because we just as the mayor had said, we promised them 17 million 1 year, right? So we're just promising to fix, the language is so broad, street repair. We can repair one street and we're done. And that's why I wanted some language in there, and I think bifurcating it would only be appropriate because they're two separate bonds, not one. And quite frankly, we don't even know the information of how much the total cost will be of both, because we only have information on the one. So I think it would be only fair to bifurcate it, and I think it would be more accountable if we were to include that language in.
Councilman Khamis, I know we're short on time, and I think he
Okay,
really just wants to
that's it.
know, would you support it?
I did include it. What you're talking about, I said yes to.
You bifurcated them?
That I did not include, but I'm willing to bifurcate it. But I'm saying what you're arguing now, which is being explicit and adding the actual dollar amount, I said yes to.
Okay, so I can't support the whole thing, but if you bifurcated it, I could support the 650 that is spelled out.
Okay, so